Boy, is it a great day to be a duck. Welcome, everyone, to the first edition of the Autzen-Zone podcast. I'm your host, Jesse, coming to you from Portland, Oregon. It is January 22nd. Um, all your questions are welcome, so please feel to write them down anytime. Um, what I'd like to talk to you guys about today is a couple of things. I'm probably going to keep this podcast pretty short. uh, get you guys out of here relatively soon. But Chris Hampton, we made a new hire, the defensive staff. Adrian Klemm, rumors circling that he might take the OC job at New England, Bill Belichick. And then we'll probably just go over a couple of recruiting topics and transfer portal news. Transfer portal just closed the other day, so we won't be hearing about it for quite some time. But yeah, let's just dive right into it. Recent news is Chris Hampton is being hired on as a safeties coach to fill the position that was left by Matt Powledge. Chris Hampton is coming from Tulane, as he previously held the defensive coordinator and defensive backs position. And they've had an excellent season in 2022. What a remarkable turnaround in beating USC in the Cotton Bowl. Large part of that has to do with Chris Hampton, but a large part of it has to do with the offense and USC not being able to stop anyone. So Chris Hampton, he is coming over and is going to coach the safeties, and he will be co-defensive coordinator, as the same position as Matt Powledge did when he was here. I think this is a good move all around, an A+ hire. It has the potential to be really, really good, and it has an excellent payoff for the Ducks. The reason being is because Chris Hampton, he played defensive back in the mid 2000s in the SEC for South Carolina. And then he has an excellent history of coaching that position for over a decade. I'll just read off to you some of the position or the titles that he's held and the places he's been. From 2010 to 2011, he was at Central Arkansas. After that, he was the defensive backs coach from 2012 to 2016 at McNeese State. He moved on to the same position at Tulane 2016 to 2020 and moved on to cornerbacks coach at Duke from 2020 to 2021, so only just a year. And then his previous job was the defensive backs coach and defensive coordinator at Tulane before coming here. So again, like I said, a lot of experience coaching the safeties. And from what I've gathered and the videos that I've watched on him, he seems like a very personable guy. He's young. He's somebody that can relate to kids. Um, he's just gonna do a really good job, I think, at recruiting and with so much knowledge. And I think this will be an excellent addition to Tosh Lapoy, because as we saw this past season, Ducks struggled with defense, especially getting off the field on third down. Um, and while Tosh Lapoy is a very, very valuable member to our staff, I think he lacked in certain aspects with regards to X's and O's, and third down defense, pass defense. And you could attribute that to not having the type of personnel that Dan Lanning and Tosh Lapoy are looking at. Now they have more of the roster that they're looking to roll with for their defense come 2023. And I think Chris Hampton will just elevate that potential of this defense for this coming year because he has so much experience coaching the safeties. And let's be real, like while Tulane they did an awesome job this year, you're not bringing in the 4 or 5 star kids that Oregon, the national brands, that like I said, Oregon, USC, Alabama, those guys are bringing it. So what how do you succeed? Well, you have to be smart with the X's and O's, and you also have to be able to develop those players and really dig out the potential that they have. You have to work with what you got. Um, so I think in a better position, Chris Hampton, with more resources like Oregon, they have Nike, they have the NIL. Um, I think Chris can really bring in the type of safeties that Dan Lanning needs. I think that Chris Hampton will also be a good teacher for um, not just the safeties, but could be a real addition to the defensive backs as a whole. Um, and then we also heard news, switching to another subject. It's Coach Adrian Klemm. He was rumored to be interviewing for the offensive coordinator position at New England under Bill Belichick. Um, and while I think he is an awesome coach, I don't think he's ever held a offensive coordinator position before. So while I don't think that he would do a bad job, I think he would do. He has the potential to do a good job. Um, he just doesn't have that offensive coordinator experience that maybe Bill Belichick is looking for. And I mean, who's to say? I mean, Kenny Dillingham didn't have any real full time offensive coordinator experience prior to being, a full time OC at Oregon, and look at how he did. So, if Clem takes the job at New England, um, that would be a huge loss, just because I think Clem did a really good job coaching the offensive line as a whole. I think if I'm not mistaken, we led the nation in, well, we had the fewest amount of sacks this year. We're top 3 for sure. We did a really good job. And Clem, with his ties in Southern California, nationwide, that would be a huge blow to the recruiting staff. But I think, as Dan Lanning has, shown us, he's able to go out and get the guys that he wants and he thinks that can fit those roles, and come in right away and have an immediate impact. Um, Dan Lanning has that Rolodex of guys that he was looking for prior to becoming the head coach. He had a list of names, list of guys that he was wanting to go after. Had he ever been, um, gotten a head coaching job? And Adrian Klemm was one of them. So just for exercise purposes, let's say Clem does leave for the OC position. I think Dan Lanning would bring in somebody that he knows and has prior experience with the offensive line. I think because Clem and the offensive line excelled this year, I think Dan Lanning knows the standard at the offensive line and what he's looking for. So I think Dan Lanning would bring in somebody just as good or better. You never know. And if Clem stays, I think this is a really big year for him. because a lot of those guys that he coached was not his guys; they were Mario's guys. Um, and having those guys gone, you have a chance to prove that you can develop who you have on the roster and develop them into the way, mold them into the way that you want. So if he stays on the roster, this is a really big year for Clem as he gets to show how he is as a teacher and not just as a recruiter. Um, I really like Clem. I think he's an awesome part of this staff. I would be sad to see him go, um, but I'd also be happy for him if he did take the coordinator job under Bill Belichick. Um, so moving on, I think this will be my last topic. Is recruiting and transfer portal news. Like I was saying earlier, the transfer portal did close. So kids are not allowed to enter the portal, I think, until May, if I'm not mistaken. Um, but they can still make their decisions on who the kids that are in the portal. They can still make their decisions of where they want to go. Um, we just lost Isaiah Crocker, longtime wide receiver. I think he was the 2018 class. Maybe it was 2017. Yeah, 2018 class. When Willie Taggart left, he was one of the key receivers that we got out of that class. And, he never found a role. Unfortunately, he never found a role. I wish him all the best. I think I think because because he never carved out a role, um, and he's only getting older. He only has so much eligibility left. He has to go somewhere and show that he can perform. I personally would like to see him go to Oregon State. Jonathan Smith does an excellent job. He has a track record of bringing in guys from the transfer portal and really making them shine. It's just up the street from Eugene, and they just got DJU. So, what better place to go to than Oregon State, where you can maximize your talents? Um, I would really hate for him to go to Southern Cal or Washington, but I wouldn't. I'd be pretty happy if he went to Oregon State where his talents can be utilized and he can really show out. We just lost Isaiah Brevard as well to the transfer portal. He was the guy that Joe Moorhead recruited when he was here. Um, yeah, again, just never carved out a role when you got guys like Troy Franklin, Dante Thornton. You also had Chase Cota, who came in via the transfer portal. Just never carved out a role because we have those guys that are of similar size, um, similar athleticism. The 6'2", 6'5" guys that can play the X or Z. And hey, if he wants to go back home down south, I think it's from the state of Mississippi. Mississippi, excuse me. More power to him. So we lose two new receivers to the transfer portal, um, but I wouldn't be too worried because we got guys like Jurion Dickey and Ashton Kozart coming in. We have Bo Nix's adopted brother, um, Tez, coming in, and one thing to note, you see all this talent leaving the roster, but it provides opportunities for more talented guys to come in. So Oregon might be losing a lot of guys, but they're going to be bringing in a lot of guys. I mean, look, you got what 96, 97 guys on the roster, and you're supposed to get down to 85. Yeah, so Oregon is not going to fall behind in the transfer portal Oregon's going to be just fine. Um, in terms of getting down to that number, I really, I don't like to say this because I don't want anyone to leave because they're, you know, once a dunk, once a duck, always a duck. Um, uh, I think if there's any position that we would be okay with in terms of leaving, that would be the defensive line. We're pretty stacked along the defensive line, and we got a lot of guys who just haven't had that opportunity for playing time, have been kind of buried on the depth chart. I know Keanu Williams just left. He was a guy from the 2021 class that we were pretty high on. He's going someplace else to find more playing time. Um, so he will be sorely missed. And you've got guys like Jake Shipley, Suava. Um, you guys got like Mikael Afigisi. You know, those guys, they haven't really seen much playing time. So I wouldn't be surprised if they left for the transfer portal. Um, you just never know. But all in all, that position, I would probably look to see some movement. Um, and again, we're going to be adding guys, so this shouldn't be too big of an issue. And last thing that I'll talk about is prep recruiting. You know, we've got the transfer portal that just closed, so now coaches are focused on prep recruits, getting guys in for their official visits. You know, it's really nice because the coaches can now focus just on recruiting and bringing in high level players. You know, because as we all know, December is the early signing period, and you sign the majority of your class then. So this is really nice for coaches to be able to focus on just a handful of prep players and put all their chips into one basket, all their eggs into one basket for, um, you know, a number of players like Nicholas Harbor, like Roderick Pleasant, who is supposed to be visiting next weekend. And that's going to be a huge visit because we just lost Cam McCormick to Miami, who I forgot to mention. We lost Maliki Mataval. Sorry, my bad. Maliki Mataval, just lost him to UCLA. And so the opportunity for early playing time gets even larger. Um, so you come in as a high level tight end. That's where he wants to play. He wants to keep slim to be able to run track, which is awesome, and play early in his college career. I think Oregon really needs to sell the track program, show him around the new field, and really sell him on building his brand as a Oregon Olympian, an Oregon athlete, and you know for a fact that Phil Knight will be involved some sort of way, whether that be he'll be there in person or NIL indirectly. Going to be a big visit come next weekend. I hope that Dan Lanning can lock this one in. It would just be another weapon for the offense, and for Bo Nix to use, and quarterbacks in the future. And then we got Roderick Pleasant. He's going to be making his decision on February 1st. Man, man, oh man, I would love to have Roderick Pleasant on this roster. Reason being, I saw like a 5 second clip, and man, I was sold just because the speed alone. Man, he reminds me a lot of DeAnthony Thomas when he's just bolt fast. Um, he's used in the offense, but people are recruiting him for the cornerback position. But honestly, I if I were Dan Lanning, I would sell this guy on playing both offense and defense. Um, be kind of like that Charles Nelson. Um, yeah, I would say Charles Nelson kind of athlete where you play some defense, some offense. You don't have a like as solidified role, maybe like an Adoree Jackson kind of guy. Man, I would just be an excellent addition to this class. Um, so two cherries to look out for to top off this class. Um, and I'm excited to see where Chris Hampton can take us and help this defense grow from last year to this year. Um, and hopefully we get some improvement from the safeties positions and on third down defense. I think that's going to be huge this upcoming year. Adrian Klemm, if he does leave, um, that's awesome because he's going for an offensive coordinator position. But if he stays, this is going to be a big year for him to prove that he is not just a recruiter, but he's a uh, talent developer. Um, and then you got to watch out for the two names that I just mentioned come February. So leave me comments or questions you might have in the comments section, and I will catch you on the flip side. Peace, Duck fans.